Mr. Blackman, stand still. I want to see how this vintage looks dripping off someone who actually works for a living. Abigail Lawrence raised the crystal goblet with theatrical precision, her smile bright as camera flashes. The Pinot Noir cascaded down Tony Rogers' face in slow motion, saturating his light blue tuxedo as 300 guests inhaled sharply. She didn't just pour, she performed, tilting the glass with the confidence of someone who'd never faced a single consequence. Patricia Lawrence's laugh cut through the silence first, high and delighted. "Oh, Abby, you're terrible," she squealed, already filming. Gregory Lawrence stepped closer, phone up, grinning. "This is going straight to the group chat," he announced to nearby guests. "Priceless." Several phones rose in unison, capturing the moment like it was entertainment, not assault. Tony didn't move, didn't wipe his face, didn't speak. None of them realized the man they'd just humiliated on camera was the only person in that ballroom who could end their company with a single sentence, and he'd already decided to say it. Before we continue, comment where in the world you're watching from and make sure to subscribe, because what happens next rewrites the entire power structure of this room. 60 seconds earlier, Tony Rogers had entered the grand ballroom of the Ashford estate like a man who didn't need to announce himself. The chandeliers glittered overhead, reflecting off marble floors as old money circulated in tuxedos and gowns. At 39, Tony moved with the kind of calm that made people step aside without realizing they'd moved. He'd built Apex Capital Group from nothing into an infrastructure empire, and tonight was supposed to be simple. Sign the $650 million partnership that would save Lawrence Holdings from a financial collapse only their accountants knew about. Then Abigail stepped forward, wineglass raised, and everything changed. Tony didn't wipe his face. He let the wine drip down his jaw, staining the white collar of his shirt as he walked toward the stage. Each step was measured, deliberate, the kind of movement that made conversations die mid-sentence. By the time he reached the podium, the ballroom had gone silent, except for the nervous shuffle of expensive shoes on marble. He adjusted the microphone with wine-stained fingers, the red droplets visible under the spotlight. "Good evening," he said, his voice carrying the same calm he'd used to open board meetings and close billion-dollar acquisitions. "I want to thank the Lawrence family for their hospitality tonight." His gaze swept the room, landing briefly on Abigail, who still held the empty goblet, her smile frozen in place. "I came here to finalize a partnership, $650 million, infrastructure expansion, job creation, a transformative deal for Lawrence Holdings." He paused, letting the numbers settle over the crowd like weight. Several Lawrence executives had moved closer to the stage, their faces tight with confusion. Tony's expression didn't change. "That deal is canceled, effective immediately." The words landed like a detonation in a closed room. Someone gasped. A glass shattered somewhere in the back. Gregory Lawrence lunged forward, his phone forgotten in his hand, mouth open but silent. Patricia's laugh had died completely, replaced by a pale, stricken stare. "Apex Capital Group will not be moving forward with any partnership, investment, or affiliation with Lawrence Holdings or its subsidiaries." Tony continued, his tone unchanged, as if he were reading quarterly earnings. "Our legal team will handle the dissolution of preliminary agreements. Thank you for your time." He stepped back from the microphone, wine still dripping from his sleeve, and the ballroom erupted. Lawrence executives rushed toward the stage, voices overlapping in panic. "Wait, Mr. Rogers, this is a misunderstanding." But Tony was already walking toward the exit, his stride unhurried, while behind him the room descended into chaos. Phones were out again,
But this time no one was laughing. Gregory was shouting at someone about contracts. Patricia stood frozen, her face drained of color. And Abigail finally lowered the goblet, her smile gone, replaced by the first flicker of fear. The first clip hit Twitter at 11:47 p.m., 23 minutes after Tony walked out of the ballroom. 31 seconds of Abigail pouring wine over his head while her parents laughed and filmed. By midnight, it had 17,000 views. By 1 a.m., it had crossed 500,000, and the hashtag #WineGate was trending in 6 countries. The second video came from a different angle, someone near the stage who'd kept recording. Tony's walk to the podium, wine dripping, his voice steady as granite. "That deal is canceled, effective immediately." The crowd's gasp was audible. Gregory's face going pale was visible in the background. This one went viral faster, racking up 2 million views before sunrise. The comment section became a battlefield. "This is what power looks like when it doesn't need to scream." "He just canceled $650 million like he was returning a coffee." The parents filming their daughter assault someone. What kind of people are these? By 6 a.m., Lawrence Holdings' PR team was in crisis mode. Patricia Lawrence called the original poster, demanding the video be taken down. The poster refused and posted screenshots of the threatening voicemail. That went viral too. Gregory tried a different approach, claiming the videos were edited and missing context. Nobody believed him. Too many phones had captured too many angles. The business press picked it up by mid-morning. Bloomberg ran with Billionaire cancels $650 million deal after public humiliation. Forbes went sharper. When elites forget who holds the power. CNBC brought on analysts who called it the most expensive glass of wine in corporate history. Lawrence Holdings stock opened down 14% and kept falling. Investors started calling, not the Lawrences, Tony. 3 private equity firms reached out before noon, wanting to know if he had capacity for alternative partnerships. 2 competitors of Lawrence Holdings sent discreet inquiries about strategic opportunities. Tony's assistant fielded 47 calls in 3 hours. The Lawrences tried mass reporting the videos for harassment. Twitter denied the requests. They hired a reputation management firm that flooded comment sections with defensive narratives. Overreaction, cancel culture, business disagreement blown out of proportion. Every attempt made it worse. By evening, investigative journalists were digging into Lawrence Holdings' financials, asking why a company needed a $650 million bailout badly enough to host a gala. And Tony said nothing. Didn't release a statement, didn't do interviews, didn't acknowledge the firestorm. His silence made him untouchable. The more the Lawrences scrambled, the more composed he looked by comparison. The contrast wasn't just viral, it was damning. The lawsuit arrived at Tony's office 72 hours after the gala. Lawrence Holdings v. Rogers, alleging breach of contract, defamation, and malicious interference with business operations. The filing claimed Tony had violated a binding letter of intent and damaged Lawrence's reputation with reckless and vindictive conduct. They were seeking $800 million in damages, more than the deal itself. Gregory Lawrence appeared on CNBC that afternoon, his voice measured, his expression wounded. "We welcomed Mr. Rogers into our home, treated him with respect, and he responded by humiliating our family publicly over what was, frankly, a teenage mistake." He leaned forward, hands clasped. "My daughter made an error in judgment. She's 14. But his reaction was disproportionate, aggressive, and frankly concerning. We're talking about a man who destroys partnerships over a spilled drink. The narrative shift was surgical. Patricia gave a tearful interview to Sympathetic Anchor, describing Abigail as traumatized by the backlash. "She's a child," Patricia whispered, dabbing her eyes, "and now she's getting death threats because a powerful man decided to punish our entire family." The subtext was clear without being explicit. Dangerous, volatile, overreaction. Code words that didn't need translation. By the end of the week, Tony's partners started receiving calls. Nothing direct, just questions. A senior VP at Meridian Bank mentioned casually that some concerns had been raised about Apex Capital's stability. An investor in Tony's infrastructure fund got a call from someone at the SEC asking about compliance documentation for a 3-year-old transaction that had already been audited twice. Tony's CFO flagged unusual scrutiny on recent wire transfers, nothing illegal, just delayed, questioned, flagged for routine review. Then the banking pressure began. Eastern Atlantic Financial, one of Apex's primary credit partners, requested an urgent meeting to discuss risk exposure. They cited the lawsuit and reputational concerns raised by institutional clients. 2 other banks sent similar letters within 48 hours. None of them explicitly threatened to pull funding, but the message was unmistakable. The Lawrences had reach, and they were using it. Tony's general counsel laid the subpoenas across his desk. Discovery requests, depositions, financial records going back a decade. "They're not trying to win the lawsuit," she said quietly. "They're trying to bury you in it. Bleed you dry on legal fees while they whisper to every institution you work with." Tony read through the filings in silence, his expression unreadable. Outside his office window, the city glittered with lights. Somewhere in that grid, the Lawrences were making more calls, applying more pressure, constructing a cage made of paperwork and innuendo. They'd turned humiliation into warfare, and they were playing to win. The video dropped on a Friday morning, leaked to 3 major outlets simultaneously. Grainy security footage, timestamped 2 hours before the gala, showing Tony in a hallway with Abigail. The angle was tight, the audio muffled, but the body language looked damning. Tony appeared to grab her arm. She pulled back, his finger pointed close to her face. The caption read, "Exclusive footage shows Rogers confronting Lawrence's daughter hours before incident." Cable news ran it on loop. Legal analysts debated whether it constituted assault. Social media erupted with accusations Tony had threatened a child, that the wine was retaliation, that he'd been the aggressor all along. The Lawrence legal team released a statement expressing grave concern and requesting a criminal investigation into intimidation of a minor. That evening, Abigail appeared on primetime television, seated next to her mother, looking younger than her 14 years in a simple sweater. Her voice trembled as she described the encounter. "He cornered me near the coat room. Said if my parents embarrassed him, there would be consequences. I was scared, so I tried to laugh it off later at the party. But I guess that made him angrier." Patricia squeezed her daughter's hand, tears streaming. The interviewer's expression was sympathetic, protective. Why would a grown man threaten a teenager? By Monday morning, the damage was catastrophic. Meridian Bank suspended Apex Capital's credit line pending investigation of serious allegations. 2 institutional investors in Tony's infrastructure fund issued redemption notices. The board of directors called an emergency meeting, their voices tight with panic over speakerphone. "Tony, we need answers. Is any of this true? Because if it is, it's not," Tony said quietly, staring at the frozen frame of the security footage on his screen. His attorney sat across from him, face grim. "Then we need to prove it," the board chair said. "Fast, because 3 more partners are threatening to pull out, and the SEC just opened a formal inquiry." Tony replayed the video for the 7th time, studying every pixel. Something about the lighting was wrong. The timestamp format didn't match the Ashford estate's standard security system, and he'd never been near the coat room that night. He'd arrived through the main entrance and gone straight to the reception area. But proving that required access to the real footage, and the estate was controlled by Lawrence family friends. His general counsel closed her laptop slowly. "Tony, they're not just trying to win anymore. They're trying to destroy you, criminally, financially, professionally. And right now, it's working." Tony's forensic analyst worked through the night, frame by frame, pixel by pixel. Rachel Chen had built her reputation dismantling deepfakes for federal prosecutors, and she approached the security footage like a crime scene. At 3:47 a.m., she called Tony's cell. "You need to see this, now." The conference room screen displayed the hallway video, frozen on a moment where Tony's face was partially visible. Rachel zoomed in on a decorative mirror in the background. "Watch the reflection." She played it forward slowly. Tony's reflection moved half a second out of sync with his body. Not much. Most people would miss it entirely, but once you saw it, you couldn't unsee it. This is composited footage. They took real surveillance from the estate and inserted a digital model of you into it. She pulled up the metadata next. The timestamp format uses a European date structure: day, month, year. The Ashford estate's actual system uses month/day/year. I pulled 3 other events from their public archives to confirm. She displayed them side by side. Every legitimate video from the estate followed the same American format. This one didn't. Tony's attorney leaned forward, studying the screen. "Can you prove this in court?" Rachel nodded. "I can show the reflection discrepancy, the metadata inconsistency, and the lighting angles. The hallway in this video has overhead fluorescence, but the Ashford estate uses period-appropriate sconces. Whoever made this used stock footage from a different location entirely." Tony stood, hands braced against the table, staring at the fabricated video. This wasn't a panicked response to the gala. This was premeditated, sophisticated, expensive. Someone had hired professionals, acquired footage, built a forgery, detailed enough to fool cable news and institutional investors. "How long does something like this take to produce?" he asked quietly. "Minimum 72 hours with the right software and team," Rachel said. "More likely a week, given the quality. They had to match your appearance, clothing, movements. This was in production before the gala even happened." The realization settled over the room like ice water. Tony turned to his general counsel. "They planned the wine incident, knew I'd react, built the fake video as insurance in case canceling the deal made them look bad." His voice was calm, but his hands had curled into fists. This wasn't about humiliation. It was a setup. His CFO pulled up financial records. If they knew the deal was their only way out of collapse, and they knew you might walk, they needed a way to destroy you if you did. She looked up, face pale. "This means they've been planning to take you down for weeks, maybe longer." The email arrived at 2:14 a.m. with no subject line and a sender name Tony didn't recognize. M. Castellano, Proton Mail. "Mr. Rogers, I worked for Lawrence Holdings for 17 years. I have documentation you need to see. They've done this before. You're not the first. Please meet me. I'm risking everything sending this." Tony's security team vetted the sender for 2 days before agreeing to a meeting at a neutral location, a corporate litigation firm's conference room with attorneys present. The woman who walked in was 53, impeccably dressed, and carrying two banker's boxes that looked like they weighed more than she did. Maria Castellano had been Lawrence Holdings' senior compliance officer until she'd been quietly forced out 18 months earlier with an NDA and a severance package. The board vote took place 6 days after the press conference, in the same room where they demanded answers during Tony's darkest hour. This time, the motion wasn't whether to remove him, it was whether to expand his authority. 12 votes in favor, 0 against, 1 abstention from a member who'd pushed hardest for his resignation and now couldn't meet his eyes. "Motion carries," the board chair said quietly. "Tony, the company is yours to rebuild." Rebuilding happened faster than the collapse. Meridian Bank reinstated Apex Capital's credit line with an apology and improved terms. The 2 institutional investors who'd filed redemption notices rescinded them and increased their positions. 3 new partnership offers arrived from firms that had watched Tony dismantle a dynasty with evidence and precision. His CFO presented the numbers at the next quarterly meeting. Revenue projections up 18%, investor confidence at an all-time high. But Tony didn't stop at stabilization. 8 weeks after the press conference, he stood in a different ballroom, smaller, less ostentatious, filled with journalists, legal advocates, and former corporate whistleblowers. Today, Apex Capital Group is launching the Castellano Institute for Corporate Accountability, he announced, naming it after the woman whose courage had made justice possible. A fully funded organization providing legal protection, financial support, and career resources for whistleblowers who expose corporate fraud and discrimination. Maria Castellano stood beside him as the founding director, no longer silent, no longer afraid. The Institute's first action was funding legal representation for 3 other executives who'd been targeted by companies using the Lawrence playbook. "Retaliation only works when people are isolated," Tony said during the Kuyanda. "We're making sure no one has to fight alone." 6 months later, Tony received an invitation to the governor's business leadership gala, the kind of ultra-elite event where old money and new power converged under crystal chandeliers. He almost declined. Then he thought about the last ballroom, the wine, the laughter, the assumption that he could be humiliated without consequence. He arrived in a midnight blue tux, walking through the entrance with the same measured calm that had carried him through everything. But this time, conversations didn't just pause. They stopped. People didn't move aside. They approached. A senator asked about the Castellano Institute. A Fortune 500 CEO requested a meeting to discuss partnership opportunities. The governor herself crossed the room to shake his hand. "Mr. Rogers, your work is extraordinary. We need more leaders like you." Tony accepted a glass of champagne from a server, not wine, never wine, and surveyed the room. Somewhere across the city, Lawrence Holdings was being liquidated in bankruptcy proceedings. Gregory and Patricia faced multiple felony charges. Abigail had been enrolled in a private school in Europe, shielded from the wreckage her parents had created. A young woman approached, nervous, holding a phone. "Mr. Rogers, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I'm a business student, and what you did, exposing them, building the institute, it changed how I think about power." She hesitated. "Could I get a photo?" Tony smiled, the kind that didn't need to prove anything, and nodded. He wasn't tolerated anymore. He was undeniable. And this time no one was laughing. "I stayed silent because I have a daughter in college and a mortgage," she said, setting the boxes on the table. "But watching them do to you what they did to others, I can't anymore." She opened the first box. Inside were leather-bound journals, USB drives, printed emails, and spreadsheets annotated in meticulous handwriting. 17 years of documentation. Every discriminatory hiring practice, every fraudulent contract, every time they targeted someone who threatened their control. Tony's attorney began pulling files. There were emails from Gregory Lawrence instructing HR to find reasons to reject qualified black candidates for executive positions. Recordings of Patricia dismissing sexual harassment complaints because the accusers were making it difficult for everyone. Financial documents showing Lawrence Holdings had structured the $650 million deal to offload toxic assets onto Apex's books while retaining profitable divisions, a setup designed to let them recover while Tony's company absorbed losses. Maria pulled out a specific folder, her hands shaking slightly. 3 years ago, they partnered with Chen Patel Industries. Same structure, massive deal, public event, minority-owned firm. The CEO, David Chen, questioned some contract terms during due diligence. 2 weeks later, a video surfaced showing him allegedly threatening a Lawrence employee. It killed the deal and destroyed his reputation. She looked directly at Tony. The video was fabricated. I have the invoices from the media production company they used. Same vendor who just made yours. Tony's CFO cross-referenced the financial documents with public records. This isn't just fraud. This is a pattern. They've been using minority-owned firms as bailout targets for years, and if anyone resists, they destroy them systematically. She looked up, voice tight. The $650 million deal was never meant to be a partnership. It was designed to collapse your company while saving theirs. Maria placed one final item on the table, a recorded board meeting from 6 weeks before the gala. Gregory's voice was clear. Rogers won't walk away from this kind of money, and if he does, we have contingencies. Laughter followed. Patricia's voice, I always said we should have hired someone more compliant. Tony stood slowly, studying the evidence spread across the table like a map of systemic corruption. How many others are there? Maria met his eyes. At least 7 that I documented, probably more I never saw. Tony's PR strategist laid out the options with clinical precision. Traditional press release, they'll spin it before the second paragraph hits. Lawsuit filing gets buried in legal proceedings for months. Exclusive interview, they control the edit. She paused. Or we go nuclear. Live press conference. No cuts, no edits, no opportunity for them to shape the narrative before it lands. His general counsel shook her head. Live is high risk. If we stumble, if the evidence doesn't land clearly, if their legal team files an injunction mid-broadcast, Tony cut her off. They've spent 3 weeks controlling the story. Every outlet, every platform, every conversation filtered through their version. We go live or we lose. The team had 96 hours to build an airtight presentation. Rachel Chen prepared the forensic breakdown of the fake security footage. Side-by-side comparisons, metadata analysis, expert testimony from 2 additional digital forensic specialists. Every claim needed to be bulletproof, demonstrable in real time, impossible to dismiss as technical jargon. Maria Castellano worked with attorneys to organize 17 years of documentation into a digestible timeline. They created visual exhibits, emails with highlighted discriminatory language, financial flowcharts showing how the $650 million deal was structured to transfer liability, recordings transcribed and verified by independent audio analysts. Each piece of evidence was cross-referenced with public records, time-stamped and authenticated. Tony's media team coordinated simultaneous releases. The moment the press conference began, full evidence packets would hit the inboxes of the SEC, Department of Justice, major financial publications, and every institutional investor connected to Lawrence Holdings. No embargoes, no advance notice. The Lawrences wouldn't have time to file injunctions or craft counter-narratives before the information saturated every channel. They rented the Meridian Grand Ballroom, the same venue where Tony had announced his company's IPO 5 years earlier. The symbolism was deliberate. Invitations went to every major outlet, financial analyst, and business reporter in the region. No details, just a subject line. Apex Capital Group, CEO Tony Rogers, setting the record straight. The night before, Tony rehearsed with his team until 2 a.m. Every transition, every visual cue, every potential question anticipated and answered. His attorney ran through worst-case scenarios. What if they claim defamation mid-broadcast? What if someone pulls fire alarms? What if their legal team shows up with a court order? They built contingencies for every variable. At 6 a.m. on the day of the conference, Tony stood in his office watching the sun rise over the city. His CFO appeared in the doorway. 73 media outlets confirmed. Bloomberg sending their lead anchor. The live stream set up on 4 platforms simultaneously. They can't take it down fast enough to matter. She paused. Tony, once you do this, there's no taking it back. He turned from the window, his expression calm but absolute. Good. Tony stepped to the podium at exactly 10 a.m. 73 cameras trained on his face, 4 live streams broadcasting to a combined audience that would peak at 2.3 million viewers. He didn't waste time with introductions. 3 weeks ago, I was publicly humiliated at a charity gala. What followed was a coordinated campaign to destroy my company and reputation using fabricated evidence. Today, I'm providing proof that this wasn't personal retaliation, it was corporate fraud. The screen behind him lit up with the security footage, the one showing him allegedly threatening Abigail. Then Rachel Chen's analysis played side by side, the reflection discrepancy highlighted in slow motion, the metadata comparison, the lighting inconsistencies. This video is a forgery, Tony said calmly, produced by the same media company Lawrence Holdings used to fabricate evidence against David Chen 3 years ago. Here are the invoices. The second screen displayed emails from Gregory Lawrence instructing the production of contingency footage 6 days before the gala. The audience in the ballroom went silent. On camera, several reporters leaned forward, phones out, already filing breaking news alerts. Tony moved to the financial documents next. The $650 million partnership was structured to transfer toxic assets from Lawrence Holdings onto Apex Capital's balance sheet while they retained profitable divisions. This wasn't a partnership. It was a financial trap designed to collapse my company while saving theirs. The flow charts were color-coded, impossible to misinterpret. Maria Castellano appeared via video testimony, walking through 17 years of documented patterns, discriminatory hiring, fraudulent contracts, systematic targeting of minority-owned firms. At 10:47 a.m., while Tony was still presenting, SEC enforcement agents entered Lawrence Holdings headquarters with warrants. Bloomberg's breaking news banner went live. Federal investigation launched into Lawrence Holdings. CNBC cut to footage of executives being escorted from the building. Lawrence Holdings stock opened trading at $87 per share. By 11:15, it was at $64. By noon, $41. Trading was halted twice for volatility. Institutional investors issued statements distancing themselves from the company. 3 board members resigned via emergency letters citing lack of disclosure regarding material liabilities. Gregory and Patricia Lawrence's phones went straight to voicemail. Their attorney released a statement calling Tony's evidence misleading and taken out of context. But by then, federal prosecutors had already issued grand jury subpoenas. The DOJ opened a criminal investigation into wire fraud, obstruction of justice, and conspiracy. 6 Lawrence Holdings executives, including the CFO and general counsel, were detained for questioning. The social collapse was swift and total. Country club memberships were suspended pending review. Charity boards requested resignations. The Harrington Foundation, where the original gala had been held, issued a statement condemning actions incompatible with our values and announced they were returning all Lawrence family donations. Patricia's assistant quit via text message that got leaked to Page 6. By evening, Abigail's tearful interview had been pulled from streaming platforms, replaced with disclaimers about ongoing investigations into factual accuracy. The family's PR firm dropped them. Their mansion went dark, security gates closed as news vans lined the street outside, and Tony Rogers stood in his office, watching the coverage in silence, knowing the empire that had tried to bury him was now burying itself. The board vote took place 6 days after the press conference, in the same room where they demanded answers during Tony's darkest hour. This time, the motion wasn't whether to remove him, it was whether to expand his authority. 12 votes in favor, 0 against, 1 abstention from a member who'd pushed hardest for his resignation, and now couldn't meet his eyes. "Motion carries," the board chair said quietly. "Tony, the company is yours to rebuild." Rebuilding happened faster than the collapse. Meridian Bank reinstated Apex Capital's credit line with an apology and improved terms. The 2 institutional investors who'd filed redemption notices rescinded them and increased their positions. 3 new partnership offers arrived from firms that had watched Tony dismantle a dynasty with evidence and precision. His CFO presented the numbers at the next quarterly meeting. Revenue projections up 18%. Investor confidence at an all-time high. But Tony didn't stop at stabilization. 8 weeks after the press conference, he stood in a different ballroom, smaller, less ostentatious, filled with journalists, legal advocates, and former corporate whistleblowers. Today, Apex Capital Group is launching the Castellano Institute for Corporate Accountability, he announced, naming it after the woman whose courage had made justice possible, a fully funded organization providing legal protection, financial support, and career resources for whistleblowers who expose corporate fraud and discrimination. Maria Castellano stood beside him as the founding director, no longer silent, no longer afraid. The Institute's first action was funding legal representation for 3 other executives who'd been targeted by companies using the Lawrence playbook. Retaliation only works when people are isolated, Tony said during the Kuanda. We're making sure no one has to fight alone. 6 months later, Tony received an invitation to the governor's business leadership gala, the kind of ultra-elite event where old money and new power converged under crystal chandeliers. He almost declined. Then he thought about the last ballroom, the wine, the laughter, the assumption that he could be humiliated without consequence. He arrived in a midnight blue tux, walking through the entrance with the same measured calm that had carried him through everything. But this time, conversations didn't just pause. They stopped. People didn't move aside. They approached. A senator asked about the Castellano Institute. A Fortune 500 CEO requested a meeting to discuss partnership opportunities. The governor herself crossed the room to shake his hand. "Mr. Rogers, your work is extraordinary. We need more leaders like you. Tony accepted a glass of champagne from a server, not wine, never wine, and surveyed the room. Somewhere across the city, Lawrence Holdings was being liquidated in bankruptcy proceedings. Gregory and Patricia faced multiple felony charges. Abigail had been enrolled in a private school in Europe, shielded from the wreckage her parents had created. A young woman approached, nervous, holding a phone. "Mr. Rogers, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I'm a business student, and what you did, exposing them, building the institute, it changed how I think about power." She hesitated. "Could I get a photo?" Tony smiled, the kind that didn't need to prove anything, and nodded. He wasn't tolerated anymore, he was undeniable. And this time no one was laughing.